Hey dudes, it's Llarold. We've got a bit of a two-stage video for you here today. First off, I'm going to break down what's coming in patch 11.2, which is landing today. But that's not enough for me. I also want to take a look forward and give some speculation on when we can reasonably expect the release of the next WoW expansion, Midnight. And also all the content patches in between now and then, and the content that will happen along the way like the beta, player housing, and Legion remix. So let's go ahead and get right into it, but first, join our Discord in the description and say hello to me and Sunset if you haven't already. Alright, so we have the patch notes. These are a couple of days old at this point, and there is a fair amount of stuff in this patch. You know, it's a typical WoW patch. There's going to be a new zone to play around with. It's called Koresh. It's going to have Tazavesh being brought back from Shadowlands, which is actually pretty cool. We're both, I think, very happy about that. Reusing Tazavesh is smart, both because it is like a pretty cool thematic zone with ethereals in it, which are an NPC type, like, you know, a race of NPCs that players really like. They're a big fan favorite, right? But also this area was kind of a place we didn't really spend a lot of time in Shadowlands, so kind of felt like a, I don't know, underused resource. And definitely they should send us back to Suramar City at some point in the future for the same reason. Beautiful, beautiful place, like wonderful architecture, really great artwork. Really underutilized, so it would be good for us to just kind of go back and spend some time there as well. There's also going to be a legendary cloak that we'll be given access to throughout the whole Season 3, and there won't be any cloak drops in any of the like loot tables in dungeons or raids or delves or anything this season. They planned ahead for that, and that's good. There are some basic skills, but basically it just boils down to being like a damage proc if you're a DPS, a healing proc if you're a healer, or a shielding proc if you're a tank. So threat problems are going to continue to be an issue and become even worse of an issue throughout the season, but you know, what else is new, right? Now there is going to be some new outdoor stuff to play around with. Phase diving, this will be a new mechanic that you can use the cloak to like interact with, and also like some growing some plants, building up the ecodomes. They're kind of a Pokemon type of deal. That's a little bit different from at battling, more of like gathering whatever monsters together to create a zoo, something like that. You know, it's a cool idea. Then of course there's going to be a raid and Mythic Plus dungeons, you know, all the usual stuff you would expect in a patch, right? Nothing surprising there. And so in terms of the schedule, as of today, you know, the new world boss is actually going to be dropping today. Delve tiers will be available, but they won't be bountiful, so they might as well not exist. And you can do dungeons, but not really. You can do Mythic 0 dungeons. You can't do the raid yet. That, you know, the raid and Mythic Plus don't like become available until next week, which is fine. You'll be able to complete the first 75%. Actually, if I remember correctly from testing on the PTR, more like the first 90% of the quest line this week, and then you'll be able to finish like the final, whatever, 10-20% of the quest line starting next week, and then that'll be that, right? So not a lot of time gating. Basically, the last little bit of the quest line does send you into the raid, and you can't really go into the raid if the raid's not available, right? So obviously that had to be time delayed by 1 week, but really not a big deal. Alright, so there are also a bunch of class changes, and I'll get into those in a minute, but before I do, I just kind of wanted to talk a bit about the outdoor zone. Something that we've both noticed over the past several years of WoW is that every patch is kind of marketed as the biggest patch ever, and not to knock the WoW team for that. It is a solid marketing strategy. It does sound better than like, this is a small patch, right? But every patch can't be the biggest patch ever, forever. And in terms of the size of this patch, from our testing on the PTR, it's definitely not the biggest patch ever. But that's okay. The zone is really beautiful, and reusing Tazavesh is smart. Being able to fly around in the new zone from day one means that we're going to actually enjoy our time there from the start, instead of hating the first 6 weeks or so when we're landlocked, and then finally having fun once flying is allowed. And raids and dungeons are still there, right? They're still the same as usual. If that's the main reason you play WoW, which it is for both of us, it is for a large number of players, and certainly for the people who are like most avidly invested in the game. Most of those people do consider themselves high-level Mythic Plusers or high-level Raiders, right? And that's not changing. This patch is going to be the same as usual for those people, including myself, and that's great. And in that case, the main story questline being quick and easy is actually kind of a positive, not a negative. It spends less of your time doing that questline and more of your time doing the other stuff that you really care more about. But if you are someone who plays for the outdoor content, then this patch may not hold your interest as long as some others. But maybe it will, or maybe it'll motivate you to try the more group-oriented content like raiding and Mythic Plus, and, see what you're missing. Alright, and with that being said, let's get on to some of the class changes. So, I have, at past I've made some jokes about, like, the amount of hunter changes, and the amount of, like, different DPS spec changes being, like, just significantly more substantive than the changes to tanks, and so I did copy all of the tank changes into a Google Doc, and then I did the same with all of the hunter changes and all the DPS DK changes, and just to hit the word count on the hunter changes, it's 5 pages, 1,567 words, DPS DK, 7 pages, 2,470 words, and tank changes are a combined 4 pages, 1,256 words, so like half as many tank changes as there are to DPS DK. This is okay. I really do think some of the changes to tanks are good. I think some of the changes to tanks are whatever, maybe like not quite enough. And then I think there are some tanks that just straight up don't really need changes and aren't getting any, and that's okay. So starting with DK, and maybe let's look here where it's a little bit more pleasing to the eye. DK is actually getting a pretty significant change to the way that the Deathbringer tree is going to work, and that's going to be true for both Frost and Blood, really. And it's not exactly my favorite change ever. Basically what they're doing with Deathbringer is exterminate this bonus that when your Reaper's Mark explodes, you like cast Marrow Rend, and then you get 2 sighs that come out, and the first one has a chance to reapply your Reaper's Mark and get that fun comboing behavior. That's gone. Instead, exterminate is just gonna like pull a Bone Storm out of the enemy, and it's also going to do more damage. It's basically going to balance out to be the same amount of damage like over the course of time, but those chances of spiking up and getting a huge like combo of exterminates over and over again, that's not going to be a thing anymore. That's not going to be possible. So on the one hand, I see this as being like kind of better for the game. Certainly the worst case scenario is gone, so that's good. But on the other hand, it does kind of stink to not have that fun potential for like a jackpot combo. Also, there's just like generic changes to DK, right? DK is losing A-Bomb Limb entirely, so Blood is kind of getting an indirect buff because Gorfine's Grasp is the only real AoE grip in town now. Sigil of Chains still exists, but it's Sigil of Chains. It's nowhere close to Gorfine's Grasp. When you need a Gorfine's Grasp in raid, you need Gorfine's Grasp. Sigil of Chains ain't cutting it. Other than that, there's really not a lot happening for Blood DK. Like, that change is happening to Reaper's Mark comboing. Okay, then Sand Lane's getting a little bit of changes, but it's kind of just like a bunch of shuffling of deck chairs around on the Titanic, like this is going to have more damage, and this one's going to have more damage, and then this one's going to have less damage. Whatever. The main thing that's actually changing for Sand Lane is instead of the Blood Beast that you spawn with Sand Lane being like a random proc, it is now just a guaranteed, when you press Dancing Rune Weapon, the Blood Beast comes out, it's out for 10 seconds, then it leaves. There you go. There is one other thing happening here, and that's for Visceral Strength. That is going to now give you Bone Shield charge whenever you hit 2 or more targets with your Blood Boil. So, like, that's pretty cool. That's this bonus down here. Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty great bonus. That's actually something I've wanted for a long time. Some sort of a defensive component added onto Blood Boil. I would like for that to just, like, kind of just be baseline to the class entirely. Maybe you could get 2 charges as Sand Lane, but, that'll work. Then finally, Blood is just getting more damage, and they're getting, like, a bit more armor. Whatever. All right, I finally scrolled down past all of the DPS CK stuff, and I've got this very small set of changes for Ventus Demon Hunter. Damage is being buffed slightly, 8%, not bad. DH already did pretty good damage, so this is going to keep them competitive as their tier set bonuses change around. Mastery getting nerfed kind of doesn't make any sense. Mastery is already, like, not that great for DH, so pretty weird to nerf that. And then 2% less parry chance during Demon Spikes is one of those nerfs that's this talent. by the way. This is one of those nerfs that if you're not playing the game at the absolute highest levels of key pushing, you could literally never notice. They could accidentally buff it by 2% instead of nerfing it by 2%, and you would never be able to tell the difference. So very strange to make this change and, like, you know, not do anything about Sigil of Chains or anything else going on that's making Demon Hunter or Sigil of Silence, you know, any of the stuff that makes DH great. This wasn't it. So they're still in great shape going forward. Beardrew is getting kind of a very funny little change here. Like Kara's Meditation, that is this bonus, which is pretty much worthless for bears. You know, it only benefits you if you're shape-shifting back and forth, and maybe that's useful if you're, I don't know, playing like Bear Druid in raid and doing some cat weaving, but in Mythic Plus, it's totally worthless. This is just being changed to be like a 5% move speed bonus in bear form, which is... sounds good, right? I'd like 5% more move speed, but then you think like, oh, Feline Swiftness over here is 15%, and it's like pretty good point. It's not nearly as expensive as a point that's all the way down in the bottom third of the tree, so that's kind of not going to be a big deal. There is a bit of a damage reduction bonus added into Druid of the Claw for Guardian. This dreadful wound bleed will now be a 15% damage reduction bonus instead of 10. That's great. Strike for the Heart will make it so that your Mangle heals you for 5% of your health. That's this bonus down here. You always take Strike for the Heart. Tear Down the Mighty is terrible because Pulverize is pretty terrible. You know, healing for 5% of your health every few seconds is actually pretty good. So, a couple of good bonuses for Bear. And then also, Guardian's just getting 12% more damage. Neat. All right, now moving on to Monk. I think the biggest thing that's happening for Brewmaster Monk is that Celestial Brew is now being put into a choice node with Celestial Infusion. You'll be able to take this. Basically what it does is it just gives you Celestial Brew that only absorbs 30% of damage instead of the full shield, but it lasts twice as long as like 15 seconds instead of 7. And so you're able to use this in dungeons. You can just kind of hit it on cooldown for the most part in dungeons, and you'll have pretty good uptime, like 50-ish% uptime on this shield that is then able to absorb a lot of value, a lot of damage, and then you'll be able to stagger the rest. This does help make Brewmaster Monks a little bit safer, a little bit more consistently tanky, and it's kind of easier to use than Celestial Brew. You don't have to specifically guard against damage right now. You can just simply like hit it when it's available, and then you'll be tankier most of the time. Invoke Nizao is getting reworked. In testing, it seems like he could be a good tool, a little bit annoying to use. You basically want to like spam Purify whenever he's up in order to make him do AoE damage. That's kind of all I really see in terms of value out of him, though. Like the talents that come like below him in the tree are pretty expensive. They're really quite point hungry, as you can see. It's taken me a moment to get down there. All right, here we go. But like you have to spend, 2 more points to get like occasional random Nizao procs, and then also a 4th point in Nizao, between the whole line of points in him to get the ability to press the button 1 extra time and get an AoE knock up. Like that's quite expensive, and I really don't think it's all that great. One other change in here that I do like quite a bit is, and I'm just like Christmas treeing here, is that Facepalm, kind of a mandatory talent, which has been a proc, is now just 100% chance to occur. You just do more damage with Tiger Palm, and you get a bit more cooldown reduction on your brews. There's no longer the RNG of it proccing or not proccing. It just always goes off every hit. I do like that. I think that's a good change. As for the rest of the stuff, I don't think it makes Brewmaster Monk great in the next season, but I do think it's at least trending in the right direction. I guess I would say my biggest fear is that this kind of feels like it might be it for Brewmaster Monk changes, and if this is it, yeah, I don't know that it's going to be enough to get Brewmaster out of the like bottom half of tanks in Mythic Plus popularity and strength and so on. All right, now let's talk about the Prot Paladin changes. And now we've finished talking about the Prot Paladin changes. This is okay, right? I think if anything, like, not that I want this to happen, I put all my eggs in the Prot Paladin basket, but Prot Paladin probably needs nerfs more than anything else, so the fact that it didn't get any is just kind of cool. We'll just, whoops, they forgot to nerf them. Great, I'll take that as a positive. And then we have Protection Warrior. Protection Warrior's gotten its whole talent tree redesigned. As you can see, it's quite different compared to what it was in the first half of the War Within. And it's honestly pretty good. Like, there are quite a few talents over here on the right hand side of the tree that give you the ability to like use execute quite a bit more freely in Mythic Plus and in like whatever, just non-single target raid situations. However, spell block is gone, so warriors are kind of like, they're kind of crashing out right now. They're feeling pretty bad about the situation, and I don't really blame them. It makes sense, but you're able to get massacre and like have execute below 35% pretty easily. There's some other stuff in here as well. You're able to get execute to cleave to additional targets for 70% of its damage. You're able to get 15% increased execute damage just all the time. You can get sudden death very easily in a Mythic Plus setup, so I really like that a lot. And then also there's a new talent that's in a choice node with Ravager where you just randomly trigger Ravager procs occasionally. And you actually trigger quite a lot of them, 5 a minute. Like, that is a lot of free Ravager procs. That's quite a lot stronger than actually casting Ravager every 90 seconds or so. So this does seem pretty good. I think Warrior, despite the loss of shield block or spell block, I should say, is in pretty good shape. And just for what it's worth, Warrior was the, like, primary bulk of all of the lines in the patch notes for tanks. Like, if we look at the word count, you know, a solid like 40% of them, 2 pages of the 4, were warrior changes. All right, so that's tank changes, but that's not everything in the patch. There is a little delve event happening. Horde and Alliance are going to be racing to see who can complete the most delves. I like that. I think that's cute. There is also a really big positive change happening in delves. The sinkhole and Takrothen Abyss are no longer underwater. I went and tested this, and it's true. You no longer have to deal with breathing in those 2 delves, so they've gone from being horrendous to actually being pretty decent now. There's also a new leave, like vote to leave system being implemented with Mythic Plus. If people leave Mythic Plus, are actually going to be punished and like get tagged with being a leaver. And you know, I think that's good for the like state of the game, for the state of people leaving Mythic Plus, which is like, could be pretty frustrating to deal with. So I think this is really good. You know, we'll see how effective it is at actually curbing people's bad behavior, but it's definitely a step in the right direction, definitely better than just doing nothing. So I really commend Blizzard for making this decision as well. And then there are 2 final things that I want to touch on. One is a new character bank update. This is really small, I guess, but on the other hand, it could be kind of huge. Basically, you're going to have 6 tabs for your bank now. So the reagent bank is gone and the void storage are both they're both being removed, but you're getting a lot more in-game storage now. Instead of just 1 bank tab, you're going to have 6. It's going to be like your warband bank or like a guild bank where you're just going to have way more storage space in your character bank. So this is great. However, they did say that during times of great demand, as in on a patch day, it may not actually work. So this is a feature that they're just already planning to not work on patch day. So, you know, good luck. I hope your stuff doesn't poof out of your bank. I feel the same way myself. I sure hope nothing poofs out of my bank. If it does, oh well. And then the final thing here is just like a really goofy accessibility feature. They're just improving your resolution on a bunch of like gigantic cursor icons, which is something that I started doing as a meme back in like Sepulchre of the first ones, and then have actually kind of stuck with just having an enormous mouse cursor when I'm playing WoW. Like, case in point, big mouse cursor. I've actually scaled it down here. But yeah, like a lot of the different mouse cursors are going to have a higher resolution, which is great. All right, so that's the patch notes. Now I want to talk about the future of WoW. So we know that the patch is landing August 5th. That's today as of the time of the video being released. And if we look at the WoW 2025 roadmap, we could see 11.2 is planned to release in the summer. The expansion reveal would be, you know, WoW Midnight would also be in the summer, and then 11.25 and 11.27 would be in the autumn, and then this little housing flag would be in the winter. So I have my spreadsheet that I've made some time ago. At the time of making this, I think before the War Within even came out, I had conjectured that Midnight would be coming out around August 28th, 2026. I've been doing a little digging and looking around here, and I think, just to kind of jump to the end here, I think it's probably like, or I said August, April 28th. I think April 21st is probably a bit more realistic. I think they're trying to move the timeline up relative to to what they've done in the last several expansions and just kind of looking back at the War Within, Dragonflight, and so on. Dragonflight patch 10.2 landed November 7th, 2023. The War Within announcement was like 4 days before that, and then roughly 9 months later was when the War Within actually came out. Yeah, but like I wrote here, about 9 months from 10.2 to the War Within launch. So I am estimating that we're about 8 months from patch 11.2 to the Midnight launching. I think they're going to do the pre-order weekend again, just like they did before. So April 21st, 2026 is when I'm guessing that Midnight is going to launch. Now, we are going to get an official date. We have a post from Blizzard from July 15th, 2025 here. Save the date for Gamescom 2025, August 19th. I know these are supposed to be menacing elemental guys, but I see this collection of 5 elementals here, and I just see like, it's me and the boys going out to get some wings. So as they say in the post here, opening night live of Gamescom, August 19th, they're gonna announce the WoW Midnight trailer. They're definitely going to give us the release date, and August 19th, that's 2 weeks away. So I would say 2 weeks from now is when we're going to learn about exactly when that release date is happening. But, you know, I'm guessing that it's going to be about 8 months from now, which would put it roughly toward the back end of April of next year. And I feel pretty good about that. You know, looking at the patch cadence throughout this expansion, they've pretty much maintained the 7-8 week patch cadence for most of the patches. You know, this one, the Siren Isle to the Goblin Raid, was 11 weeks. That one was a little slow, but they had the end of the year, holidays, and New Year, and all of that. So I think that kind of justifies why it would be a little bit delayed. And I think that'll kind of happen with the rest of this year as well. So looking at the rest of the timeline here, the roadmap, the 11.2.5 patch, new content, system updates, the 21st anniversary. So the anniversary gets celebrated in October. So you would expect this to land before then, probably in September. And I do. Autumn, September starts, I think, the 22nd of September is when autumn is supposed to technically kick off in America. I would guess that September 23rd is the date of that patch. Like it would be 7 weeks after patch day today. I think Gamescom being 2 weeks after this patch that's launching today and the Midnight announcement being there. I think the alpha will probably land like 6 to 8 weeks later. So we're talking early October with a beta happening in January. I think that the 11.2.5 patch, which they haven't talked about at all, and the roadmap is not giving it, new content. Great. That could be anything. Realistically, I think it's the Demon Hunter 3rd spec. If that's happening, I think that's the time that it would happen. We'll see what that patch content is. We're probably going to find out about that in about 2 weeks from now, right around Gamescom. That's probably when we're going to start learning what is in this patch. Then it's reasonable to assume that 8 weeks after that, so like midway through November, we'll get the 11.2.7 patch, and that would again be consistent with this. There'll be more storyline, more content, and system updates. Yeah, again, like just literal copy paste from here to here. This could be anything, but I think it's reasonable to assume with the housing banner here that housing is probably going to come a couple of weeks after that, right? So like midway through November would be slightly before Thanksgiving here in the US, and slightly before they take kind of a big extended break for November, whatever Thanksgiving festivities, then, December end of the year holidays as well. So I think it's reasonable to assume that the patch would land November 18th, and then housing would come out about 3 weeks after the patch, so like second week of December, and then Legion Remix might come out even slightly after that, maybe like the start of the year, and then last 3 months basically ending like just before Midnight comes out, which is exactly what happened with Mop Remix that was released May 16th, and it ended 19th of August, and The War Within came out August 26th, so, basically a week before. I think it's reasonable to assume that Legion Remix will probably start in January and run until, like, sometime in April, and I think that pretty much covers it for, like, all of the content that's going to be happening for WoW from now all the way until Midnight happens in April. Now, I could be wrong, but I don't think so. I think that people have a tendency to get kind of upset when expansions have been like rumored as being like kind of short. You know, like this were 5 months from today until midnight. I'm sure there would be people who would be happy, but there would be a lot of people who would be really upset about like not having enough time to finish all the collections they wanted to do, not having enough time to finish the raid tier if they're in a guild that's like trying to push all of the mythics, but you know, doing so, you know, race to world last guilds, you know what I mean, like a little bit slower. I think there would be a lot of people who would be very upset if they only had like 4 or 5 months here at the end of the expansion. So I don't really know if they're going to do a season 4 or not. I know the feedback was pretty negative on that from a lot of people in the last expansion. It went over okay in Shadowlands, not as well in Dragonflight. I wouldn't be surprised if the feedback on season 4 causes them to not bother to do that and just put more of their eggs in the like housing and Legion remix basket. Those are definitely pieces of content that people are like more universally excited for than season 4, but I wouldn't be that surprised if they do season 4 again for the War Within. You know, we'll see about that, no idea, but it's definitely possible. All right, so that's patch 11.2. That is the rest of the War Within running up to midnight. The patch is dropping any time now today. It's gonna be fun. Log in. Be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and join the Skipping Sleep Studio Discord and say hello to me and Sunset if you haven't already. And finally, thank you to all of our channel members. If you want to support us so we can keep making more WoW content, become a channel member as well. Thanks for watching. Bye.